Welcome. You've joined us for another deep dive, and this time we're getting straight to something that impacts all your learning: the connection between why you study and how you actually go about it.
Mhm.
You shared some really interesting articles and research with us, and we've been digging into it to pull out the most useful stuff for you.
Exactly. This deep dive is all about answering a question that might seem straightforward, but it has some surprising depth. How do your personal reasons for learning influence the specific learning strategies you end up choosing and, well, using?
Yeah.
Understanding this link, as you'll see, can really empower you to learn more effectively and understand why certain study methods might feel like a better fit for you than others.
Absolutely. And a foundational piece in understanding this comes from Nolan's work back in 1996. Her research really highlights that to truly grasp how someone learns, we first need to understand their underlying reasons for learning in the first place. Think about it. What is a strategy anyway? The Random House Dictionary defines it as a plan, method, or series of maneuvers for obtaining a specific goal or result.
Right, the goal.
So it naturally follows that your learning strategies are going to be connected to what you're trying to achieve through learning.
And what's fascinating here is that simply knowing a really effective learning strategy doesn't guarantee someone will actually use it.
No, not at all.
Nolan provides a great illustration. Imagine a student who has to take, say, a psychology course just to fulfill a general education requirement. They might be aware that actively connecting the psychology concepts to their own experiences, a really effective deep processing strategy, would lead to a much richer understanding and longer retention.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. For this student, their primary goal isn't necessarily to gain a deep understanding of psychology. It's more about getting a satisfactory grade so they can fulfill the requirement and move on.
Yeah, check the box.
Exactly. So if they figure out they can achieve that by just memorizing enough information to pass a multiple choice test, why would they invest extra time and effort in making those deeper
It
connections?
might even feel counterproductive.
Right. If it takes away time from other courses, they prioritize more. So for you, the key insight here is that your definition of success, even if it's just getting a grade, really drives your choices about how to study.
hmm This brings up a crucial point. If we only look at the learning strategies someone knows, we're missing a huge and vital piece of the puzzle, their underlying motivation, their why.
Yeah, the driver.
Over the last decade or so, research has increasingly recognized the critical role that learning goals play in how we select and implement learning strategies. Goals have become much more central in how we understand self-regulated learning.
So, we're talking about more than just whether you're motivated or not. Early research into motivation started to delve into the specific goals that drive that motivation. Thinkers like Ash, Crutchfield, Ames, Dweck, Mayer,
A
Nichols,
whole bunch of them.
and Spence and Helmreich, they all emphasize this fundamental idea of understanding the why behind the desire to learn something.
And one of the initial distinctions that emerged from this work was the difference between task intrinsic and task extrinsic goals.
Okay.
Condry and Chambers suggested that if your goals are primarily extrinsic,
Yeah.
focus on external rewards like grades or pleasing others, you might be more inclined to take shortcuts in your learning.
Mm-hmm.
You might prioritize strategies that offer the quickest route to that external reward, even if it means you don't achieve a very deep level of understanding.
That makes perfect sense for you.
Yay.
Right. If the main goal is just to get the certificate at the end of a course, you might focus on cramming and rote memorization rather than truly engaging with the material and trying to understand it deeply.
Exactly.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Flavel, way back in the early 80s, placed cognitive goals right at the forefront of his model of cognitive monitoring strategies. He argued that simply forming a learning goal actually sets off a chain reaction in your brain.
Exactly. When you set a learning goal, it activates what we call your metacognitive knowledge and skills.
Okay, metacognitive.
Think of metacognitive knowledge as your awareness of your own thinking and learning, knowing what you don't know, and what strategies tend to work best for you.
Right.
So, setting a goal triggers your brain to access relevant past experiences. Try to anticipate how things will go and even influence your emotional responses to the learning task.
Wow.
This then directly impacts how engaged you become with the material. Posner proposed that how you, as a student, interpret a task, including your personal reasons for doing it, significantly shapes your engagement, the specific goals you set for yourself, and how you plan to approach the task.
And it's not just about formal academic tasks either. Renshaw and Asher's interview study with children actually showed a connection between their social goals, like wanting to make friends or be liked, and the social strategies they believed were most effective.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. This suggests a broader principle. If you can influence someone's underlying goals, you can also influence the types of strategies they are likely to use, even in social situations. So for you, it highlights how your motivations in any area of life can shape your approach.
Hmm. If we connect this to the bigger picture for you, it really highlights how your personal definition of success strongly influences the learning strategies you believe are the right ones to use.
Totally.
Nichols, Potashnik, and Nolan's survey with high school students found that those who genuinely valued learning and understanding believed that putting in effort and having an interest in the subject were key to achieving success.
Right. Effort and interest.
However, students who were more focused on appearing superior to others were more likely to believe that impressing the teacher and simply behaving well in class were the most effective strategies.
So just looking good.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So it all comes back to what success means to you in a learning situation.
It absolutely does. Now, the research on goal setting itself, with prominent figures like Bandura, Locke, and Latham, adds another important layer to this.
Right.
They found that whether you actually commit to a particular learning goal depends on how you perceive the relationship between putting in effort, using specific strategies, and actually achieving the desired outcome.
Makes sense.
And these goals aren't fixed in stone. They can actually evolve and shift as you're working on a task.
Yeah, that's key. And what's really insightful for you here is how committing to goals that are challenging but still feel achievable, along with being able to see clear progress towards those goals, actually boosts both your effort and your belief in your own abilities, what we call self-efficacy.
Okay, self-efficacy.
Breaking down larger goals into smaller, more manageable short-term goals that you have some say in setting seems to be particularly effective in keeping you motivated and on track.
And this directly ties into theories of intrinsic motivation, that internal drive that comes from within you. Thinkers like Csikszentmihalyi and Larson and Deci and Ryan emphasize how feeling a sense of self-determination and receiving feedback that shows you're making progress fuels that internal drive to learn and engage with the material.
Definitely. It's important for you to note, though, that a lot of the early research on goal setting, like the work by Shunk and his colleagues, primarily focused on individual achievement goals, the desire to master a task and improve your own skills.
Okay.
This particular emphasis on mastery and personal improvement in those early studies might partially explain the really positive effects they observed on motivation and learning.
Right. Focusing on mastery had good results. So all of this early research really established a strong foundation for understanding that the why behind your learning is absolutely crucial in shaping the how.
Mm-hmm.
Then came Nichols's intentional theory, which provided a more detailed framework for really digging into this relationship between your learning goals and the strategies you choose to use.
Exactly. Nichols argued that to truly understand someone's motivation and their subsequent actions in a learning situation, you first need to understand their underlying intentions.
Makes sense.
And at the core of this theory are the goals that learners adopt, which are shaped by both their general orientations towards learning and the specific factors at play in a particular learning task.
Okay, so Nichols described two main orientations that individuals tend to have towards academic success, what he called task orientation and ego orientation.
Right, task and ego.
With a task orientation, your primary focus is on mastering the material itself, gaining a deep understanding, or simply striving to do your personal best. It's all about self-improvement and the inherent satisfaction you get from the process of learning.
Yeah, learning for learning's sake, almost.
Exactly. So for you, this might mean you're most satisfied when you feel like you truly understand a new concept.
In contrast, ego orientation is centered around demonstrating that you are more competent or more capable than others. The main goal here is to establish your superiority.
Okay, so looking better than others.
Yeah. Interestingly, these two orientations aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. Research often indicates that task and ego orientation are generally uncorrelated, meaning you could be high in both, low in both, or high in one and low in the other.
Oh, okay.
It really depends on your individual mindset and the specific learning context.
So even though both orientations involve a desire to achieve some form of success, The actual definition of what success looks like is completely different.
Totally different.
For someone who is primarily task-oriented, success is about personal growth and a deeper level of understanding. But for someone who is more ego-oriented, success is often defined by outperforming others or achieving the same result while putting in less effort.
Right, doing it easier or better than someone else.
For you, thinking about which of these resonates more can be really insightful.
And it's precisely these different definitions of success that really drive the different choices you make in terms of your learning strategies.
Ah,
This distinction provided a powerful lens for researchers to begin exploring in detail how your underlying reasons for learning directly impact the methods you choose to study.
and the empirical studies that followed Nichols' work really provided strong support for this idea. The general trend that emerged is quite clear. When your focus is on the task itself, on genuinely understanding and mastering the material, you tend to value and actually use more effective learning strategies.
The deeper ones.
You're also more likely to tap into your creativity and feel a greater sense of pride in your success when it comes as a result of your effort. This is a really important takeaway for you.
Yeah, definitely. And what's particularly interesting for you to consider is the contrast with ego involvement. When your primary focus is on outperforming others, research suggests that you're more likely to stick to surface-level learning strategies, such as simple memorization or just rereading material without much critical engagement.
So the easier stuff.
Right. It can even hinder your ability to engage in deeper processing of the information.
Wow. Nolan's own research conducted in the late 80s and early 90s with junior high and high school students really illustrated these patterns effectively.
Yeah, her work was key.
She found a strong, positive relationship between a student's task orientation and both their valuing of and their actual use of effective learning strategies. What was particularly noteworthy was that task-specific involvement, how focused you were on the learning goals for a particular assignment, showed an even stronger correlation.
Even stronger, right.
So for you, being focused on the specific learning goals of a task can be even more beneficial.
And by using multiple methods to gather data, including questionnaires, observing students while they studied, and then asking them directly about the strategies they used, Nolan's research really strengthened the reliability of these findings.
That's good science.
She also observed that as students progressed in their education, they seemed to develop a better understanding of which strategies were actually more effective for achieving deep learning. This suggests that your awareness of effective strategies can grow with experience.
That makes sense for you, right? As you gain more experience with different learning methods over time, you probably develop a better sense of what truly works for you in the long run.
Hopefully.
Nolan and Haladina's longitudinal study, which follows students over a longer period, also revealed some really important insights. They found that students who began the school year with a strong task orientation were more likely to maintain that orientation throughout the year.
Stay task-oriented.
And were also more likely to value and use deep processing strategies by the time spring came around. This highlights the stability of your learning orientation.
Yeah, it's quite sticky. And perhaps even more significantly for you, they also discovered that students who perceived their teachers as valuing understanding, the connection of new information to what they already knew, and independent thinking were also more likely to be task-oriented themselves and to value those more productive learning strategies.
So the classroom environment matters.
Uh,
A lot.
Hugely. This really underscores the powerful role that teachers and the learning environment play in shaping your learning goals and approaches.
Definitely.
Interestingly, how students perceive their own ability at the start of the year only predicted how they perceived their ability at the end, but it didn't significantly predict their motivation or how much they valued effective learning strategies.
So ability perception wasn't the main driver there. And it's also worth pointing out for you that a tendency to avoid putting in effort, what they termed work avoidance, was consistently negatively linked to the use of any kind of learning strategy.
Yeah, if you don't want to do the work, you're not looking for strategies.
Makes sense. Now, when it came to ego involvement and ego orientation, the picture was a bit more complex.
It often is.
It wasn't strongly linked to valuing or using deep processing strategies, but it did show some positive correlation with using surface-level strategies specifically for a given task.
Okay, so maybe using surface strategies to look good quickly.
Potentially. Overall, however, the connection between ego orientation and deep processing was much weaker than the connection with task orientation. So for you, focusing on outperforming others doesn't necessarily lead to adopting the best learning methods.
Right. Similar patterns emerged in the longitudinal study conducted by Meese and her colleagues with elementary science students. They found that intrinsic motivation and a focus on task mastery goals were strong drivers of active engagement in science lessons, including the use of self-monitoring and deep processing strategies.
Active engagement, yeah.
In fact, the students who exhibited high task mastery motivation along with low ego-social motivation seemed to have the most adaptive and positive overall achievement profiles.
So high task, low ego was the best combo.
Looks like it. This again emphasizes the benefits of focusing on understanding.
And Lee and Anderson's qualitative study really brought these research findings to life in a vivid way for you.
Oh yeah, that was great.
They actually observed and interviewed students during their science lessons and identified different patterns of engagement. The students who were truly task involved those aiming to make genuine scientific sense of what they were learning, consistently used strategies that focused on understanding and connecting different ideas.
Making sense of it.
This stood in stark contrast to students who seemed to be driven by a combination of ego-social goals and a desire to avoid work. One student even famously stated that they didn't like to understand the world or correct their answers because they found it boring.
Yeah, that quote really sticks with you, doesn't it?
It really does. That really highlights how different motivations can lead to completely different approaches to learning for you.
It powerfully illustrates how fundamentally different your approach to learning can be, depending on your underlying goals. And the experimental work by Graham and Golan provided further compelling evidence, demonstrating that children who were placed in situations that emphasized ego involvement actually performed worse on tasks that required deep processing compared to their peers who were either task-involved or in a control group.
So putting them in that ego mindset hurt deep learning. Wow. Even research that falls outside of Nichols's specific theoretical framework aligns with these core ideas.
Right, it's broader than just one theory.
For example, Schunken-Swartz's study on teaching writing strategies found that when students were encouraged to focus on the process of learning how to write effectively a more task-involved goal, they exhibited more strategic behavior, achieved better writing performance, and reported higher levels of self-efficacy.
Better on all fronts.
Compared to students who are primarily focused on the product of simply producing a paragraph.
And this understanding extends to how you approach seeking help when you're learning.
Ah, help seeking, okay.
Ego-involved learners can often be hesitant to ask for help because they worry that it will make them appear less capable in the eyes of others.
Right, don't want to look dumb.
Exactly. However, research by Newman and Schwager found that sixth graders who were more ego-involved tended to be less inquisitive and used more ineffective help-seeking strategies compared to their task-involved peers.
Less curious, worse help seeking.
Yeah. This connects back to the developmental understanding of ability, moving from seeing effort as directly indicative of ability to understanding ability as a capacity that can be developed through effort.
Okay, that developmental shift.
So for you, being willing to seek help can actually be a sign of a task-oriented approach to learning.
That's a really good point. So if we bring it all together for you, the evidence is pretty clear and consistent. Your reasons for learning have a really significant impact on the specific strategies you choose to use.
Absolutely.
If your primary goal is to genuinely understand and master the material, you're much more likely to naturally adopt learning strategies that support that deeper level of understanding. However, if your main goal is more about looking good or outperforming others, you might unintentionally opt for less effective strategies when it comes to actual lasting learning.
Right, the shortcuts, again. This has some really important implications, especially for educators who are trying to teach effective learning strategies.
Yeah?
Students are far more likely to actually use those strategies, particularly the more effortful, deep processing ones, if they understand how those strategies will directly help them achieve their own learning goals.
Ah, okay, so it has to connect to their goals.
Exactly. So
Okay.
for you, understanding your goals can make you a more strategic learner.
And it also highlights that study skills programs might only be truly effective if the strategies they teach are perceived as relevant and genuinely useful by you
Right. Relevant to you.
in relation to what you're trying to accomplish in your learning, which, as we've discussed, isn't always about achieving deep understanding.
True. However, it's also encouraging to remember that while you, as a student, bring your own set of goals to the learning situation, teachers and the learning environment itself can play a significant role in shaping and influencing those goals
Right, the environment again.
through the way they structure learning activities and assessment methods.
So how teachers test you matters.
Big time.
Heck yeah.
Now, it's important for you to be aware of some of the challenges that researchers face in studying this complex relationship between goals and strategy.
Okay, the measurement issues.
Right. A significant portion of the research relies on surveys to understand your motivational orientations, simply because those motivations are internal and not directly observable.
Yeah, you can't just see them.
And there are various ways that researchers measure student goals, using terms like mastery versus performance orientation, learning versus performance goals, and learning-focused versus ability-focused goals.
Lots of terms.
And these terms are often used somewhat interchangeably with the task and ego constructs we've been discussing.
But these different ways of measuring goals can have some important distinctions, especially in how they view the relationship between your perceived ability and what you define as success. For example, Dweck's well-known definitions of learning goals, aiming to increase your ability or mastery, and performance goals, aiming to maintain positive judgments of your ability, leave a little bit of room for interpretation regarding exactly how ability itself is being defined.
Yeah, what does ability mean there? That ambiguity can make it a bit tricky to predict precisely which learning strategies someone will use based solely on these broad goal orientations.
Oh, so?
For instance, if a student with a performance goal views competence as putting in effort and learning to solve problems, they might still choose to use deeper learning strategies.
Okay.
However, if another student with a performance goal defines success as solving more problems faster than their classmates, they might actively avoid those more time-consuming deep processing strategies.
Ah, okay. So it depends on their definition within that goal.
Exactly. So for you, the way you personally define what it means to be good at something can really influence your study choices.
Right. Even Hyman and Dweck's later distinction between the evaluative focus of performance goals and the improvement focus of learning goals isn't entirely clear-cut when it comes to predicting strategy use.
Why is that?
After all, as learners, you're often seeking some form of evaluation or feedback, even when your primary goal is learning and self-improvement.
That's true. You want to know if you're getting it. This really highlights for you the importance of being precise and clear when you're thinking about your own learning goals and when researchers are trying to understand these connections.
Clarity is key.
Yeah. If the definitions of goals are a bit fuzzy, it becomes more challenging to draw really meaningful conclusions about the direct link between those goals and the specific strategies you choose to use. For example, some survey scales that are designed to measure performance goals or ability-focused goals have included questions that also tap into things like wanting to avoid work or being motivated by external rewards.
Oh, mixing things up.
Right, which can make it harder to cleanly compare these concepts to something like Nichols's idea of ego orientation.
Gotcha. Shifting gears a bit, it's important for you to know that other factors related to motivation, beyond just these specific goal orientations, can also play a significant role in the learning strategies you adopt.
Okay, what else?
For instance, how you perceive your own ability in a particular subject can influence your overall motivation to learn. But as we've touched on, your underlying goals can also shape how you even define what ability means in that context.
Right, it's all connected. And attribution theory, which looks at how you explain your successes and failures in learning, suggests that if you tend to attribute a failure to a lack of effort on your part or to using ineffective strategies, you're more likely to be motivated to try new and different strategies in the future.
Okay, attributing failure to effort or strategy.
But this idea often assumes a particular definition of success, perhaps outperforming others, and a view of ability as something relatively stable and perhaps lower than others.
Ah, okay.
If you have a different view of ability, seeing it as something that can grow and improve with effort, then attributing a setback to low ability might actually encourage you to put in even more effort.
Oh, interesting twist.
So your beliefs about why you succeed or fail really matter for you.
And then there's the concept of self-efficacy, which is essentially your belief in your own ability to successfully perform specific actions or tasks.
Right, your confidence in doing something specific.
While having high self-efficacy for using a particular learning strategy is definitely important, whether you actually choose to use that strategy can still depend on your underlying learning goals.
Back to goals again.
Yep. As we discussed earlier, an ego-involved learner might avoid using a strategy like asking for help, even if they believe they could do it effectively, simply because they're worried about appearing less capable. On the other hand, a task-involved learner might readily seek help if they believe it will ultimately help them understand the material better.
Makes sense.
So for you, believing in your ability to use a strategy is important. but your reasons for learning can still influence whether you actually put it into practice.
Given all of this complexity and the many factors at play, it becomes clear that we need to broaden our approach to studying the relationship between learning goals and strategies.
Oh, so.
While relying on surveys and controlled laboratory experiments provides us with valuable initial insights, it doesn't fully capture the dynamic interplay of your motivation, your learning processes, how you set goals, and the strategies you select as they actually unfold in real-world learning environments.
Exactly. To really understand what's going on in your learning, we need to venture out of the lab and into the actual places where learning happens, classrooms, study centers, even your own home study space.
Get into the real world.
Right. So far, a lot of the research that's looked at these real-world contexts has been conducted in classrooms, and it often relies on those individual perception surveys we talked about.
The surveys again.
While these surveys offer valuable information, they don't always allow us to compare different learning environments or track how your goals and strategies might change over time within those environments.
And what's particularly insightful for you is that the learning environment itself, whether it's a classroom or an online community, is a constantly evolving culture that is shaped by everyone involved. The teachers, the other learners, and even the nature of the subject matter itself.
A living culture.
Exactly. We need more research that really delves into how this learning culture is built and how it, in turn, influences the learning strategies that you and other students adopt.
The more in-depth contextualized work, such as Mies and her colleagues' longitudinal study in elementary science and Lee and Anderson's qualitative study where they observed and interviewed students, really shines a light on this.
Yeah, those were good examples.
By using multiple sources of data over time, and by truly trying to understand the students' perspectives, they were able to gain a much richer understanding of how the learning environment, the design of specific tasks, and your individual goals all interact with each other.
Seeing the whole picture.
We definitely need more research that operates at this level of detailed investigation to really understand your learning experience.
Agreed. And while we have a good understanding that the demands of a particular learning task will influence the strategies you use, we still need more research that simultaneously examines the motivational aspects of this relationship.
Okay, motivation and task demands together.
Right. The growing field of performance assessment, which often involves more complex and open-ended tasks, could provide a valuable opportunity to study how your goals, your strategy use, and other factors like your interest in the task and its complexity all come together in authentic learning situations.
Real-world tasks.
Yeah. Insights from fields like industrial psychology, which has explored these connections in workplace settings, could also offer some very informative perspectives for educational contexts.
Interesting. Bringing in IO Psych, it's also really important for you to remember that the formal learning environment of a classroom isn't the only thing that shapes your learning.
Right. It's bigger than the classroom.
The influences of your family and your peers on your learning goals and the strategies you use are likely to be significant, especially as you progress through different stages of your development.
Family and friends matter.
And these influences probably vary across different cultural backgrounds and developmental periods. To really understand these broader influences, we probably need to move beyond just relying on surveys and explore these dynamics using more in-depth interpretive methods.
Qualitative stuff.
Perhaps even ethnographic approaches that look at learning within its natural social and cultural context.
Finally, we need to look beyond just the dimensions of task and ego orientation when we're considering the goals that can significantly influence your learning.
Okay, what else is there?
There are other important goals, such as your social goals, your desire for connection and belonging, and your need for autonomy and control over your learning, that become increasingly important, especially during adolescence.
Social goals and autonomy, right?
And while teachers clearly have an impact on your learning goals, we don't fully understand the nuances of that influence and how it might change as you move through different levels of schooling.
Teacher influence changes over time.
Seems likely. Your cultural values and expectations also play a crucial role in shaping your academic goals and your approaches to learning.
Culture is huge. And crucially for you, we need more research that examines how your individual learning goals might change over time, especially during the course of working on a specific learning task.
Yeah, how they evolve mid-task.
How do your initial motivations and your actual experience of learning, your successes and your setbacks, influence your evolving goals and the strategies you then choose to use?
Good question.
How do you assess the usefulness of different strategies based on your developing understanding of the task your personal definition of learning, and what you consider to be success.
Right. How do you decide what works?
And how does your sense of yourself as a learner in a particular context lead you to make changes in your learning strategies?
Using techniques like think and feel aloud protocols, where you verbalize your thoughts and feelings as you learn, and conducting longitudinal studies that follow learners over extended periods in natural learning settings could provide really valuable insights into these dynamic processes.
Thinking out loud while learning.
Yeah. We also need to better understand how your long-term learning goals and the strategies you prefer might shift as you gain more expertise in a particular subject area.
Ah, the expert shift.
It seems likely that as you become more knowledgeable, your reasons for learning and your preferred study methods will also evolve. But there's currently a real lack of research specifically focused on this aspect of expertise development.
So, you, our listener, might have noticed that this particular deep dive hasn't been about providing you with a neat list of specific study skills or techniques.
Nope, no listicle today.
That was a deliberate choice. We really wanted to focus on the underlying why behind your studying, which might be a slightly different angle than you're used to hearing when the topic is learning and how to do it effectively.
But the key takeaway for you is absolutely crucial. To truly understand how you learn or how anyone learns, you first have to understand their underlying goals.
It starts with goals.
While the task and ego dimensions of motivation are certainly important pieces of the puzzle, a much broader and more nuanced understanding of the various goals that drive you in different learning situations, as well as the diverse contexts in which learning takes place, is essential to fully grasp the dynamics of how you choose and use learning strategies.
We need the bigger picture. And this deeper understanding, we really hope, can help both you as a learner and any educators you might know to look beyond just the acquisition of skills and to really consider the fundamental reasons why certain learning approaches are naturally chosen.
This brings us to a final thought for you to really consider. What are the primary goals that you typically bring to your own learning experiences, whether it's for work, personal development, or just pure curiosity?
Good question to ask yourself.
And how might consciously reflecting on and perhaps even intentionally shifting those goals, maybe focusing more on the inherent satisfaction of understanding and mastering a new skill or concept, influence the learning strategies that you naturally adopt,
Yeah.
and ultimately what you learn and retain in a more meaningful and lasting way. We encourage you to take some time to reflect on your own motivations and to explore how aligning your reasons for learning with a deeper level of engagement could lead to a more enriching and ultimately more effective learning journey for you.